And so this second part of the year, I kind of wanted to do an environmental speak out and kind of get the opinion from the youth, or, you know, what they know so much about the environment. And so we ended up showing the films, The Story of Stuff. I think most of you have seen it. They're all online, and they're really great films. And they can attach, you know, they really capture a youth's attention. They're quick, they're short, and they're funny. And so then afterwards, we had a panel which consisted of a teacher from San Marcos, Mr. Gebhardt. No, not Mr. Gebhardt. I can't remember his name. It's really complicated. And then myself. And we kind of responded to questions, and we kind of moved around the speak out. And, you know, a lot of teens kind of didn't realize what was going on with the environment. And so it was a pretty great event, and I was very proud of what ended up happening. So, and hopefully, like, the domino effect continues, and so they decide to, like, kind of post it on their Facebook, or they continue talking with their friends, and overall it was pretty great. So.
Thank you, Annie. Moving on to committee member and staff communications.
Madam Chair, I don't have any staff communications, but I did want to make an announcement and let you all know that we just restarted construction on the upper Caltrans channel project. We just started yesterday, so they're doing some demolition there, and they'll start putting things back together in about a week, and we expect to be finished with that phase of that project by the end of June.
Thank you. And moving on to our business item 7A, we're going to have a presentation from Autumn Malanka on the stormwater management plan.
There it is. Okay. I'm good on clicking on that, right? 7A? Yeah, okay. It's just going to take a minute. So most of you know me.
For the benefit of the people who are watching at
Yeah.
home, could you tell them what they're about to see?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Moldaver. My name's Autumn Malanka. I've worked with the City Creeks Division for a little over 6 years now, and the Creeks Division is the administrator of the Stormwater Management Program, and I give the Creeks Advisory Committee a status update on this every year because I'm the lucky person who gets to compile the annual report for the Stormwater Management Program, and I submit that to the Water Board to comply with our regulations. So here we go. So the Stormwater Management Program, it's easier to refer to that as the SWMP. That's the acronym that everyone within the city internally has grown to know and love, and all of the Water Board staff use it as well. So you'll hear it about 30 times throughout this presentation. So the SWMP meets federal regulations, as I mentioned. Specifically, those federal regulations are the Phase 2 NPDES regulations. That stands for the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. So it has to do with managing polluted discharges into our storm drain system, which obviously gets to our creeks and ocean. The NPDES regulation satisfies the California State Stormwater Discharge Permit. That's the Phase 2 I just referred to. And all cities of a certain size or growth index are required to implement this SWMP program, and it's approved by the Water Board. So an important point that I always like to make up front is that the SWMP is implemented by all city staff. It's sometimes erroneously considered to be something that's just implemented by the City Creeks Division, but we have simply accepted the responsibility of administering the program for the city. But all city staff are a part of it, and they specifically have responsibilities and duties within the program. So we simply provide overall coordination is really what the Creeks does. The SWMP has really evolved and changed a lot over the past 7 or 8 years. There was a lot of back and forth between the Water Board and city staff in the beginning, back in 2004, 5, and 6, when the production really happened. So the program that has come to be today is really an evolved program and considerably recognized within our region because we've worked hard to get to where we are. It was finally formally approved by the Water Board in January of 2009 after about 4 years of drafts and comments and resubmittals. So the intent of the SWMP is to reduce the discharge of pollutants, as I mentioned, and mainly to protect and improve surface water quality. We meet that intent by complying with these requirements within the SWMP, and those requirements are defined within 6 minimum control measures, or what they're called, and I'll get into what exactly those are. And within those minimum control measures, those 6 chapters in the SWMP, we have best management practices, or another fond acronym of mine is BMPs. And within those BMPs, we have these measurable goals that we have to comply with, and that's what I report on every year to the Water Board, is how we're meeting up to our measurable goals. These SWMP programs are reissued or updated every 5 years, is how the regulations read, and we're currently in our 4th year of SWMP implementation, 2012. So I just submitted the 3rd annual report last year, 2011, to the Water Board in March. The annual report is due every year on April 1st to report on the previous calendar year. I found the right button. All right, so what are the minimum control measures? Here's the 6 chapters I talked about, and this is how we focus and hone in on how to manage stormwater appropriately and comply with our stormwater BMPs. The first one is public education and outreach, and public involvement and participation. Illicit discharge detection and elimination, that has a big enforcement element and a kind of a community education program. Construction site stormwater runoff control, that has to do with keeping sediment and eliminating or at least maintaining erosion on site during active construction sites. And then post-construction stormwater management is really how projects are designed to properly manage stormwater once they're finished and in place. And the last 6th minimum control measure is pollution prevention and good housekeeping for municipal operations. So that's what all the city staff is trained on annually, and how we run our day-to-day operations and facilities to make sure that we're not polluting the storm drains or the creeks. So what are these BMPs that I'm talking about? I mentioned within each of those 6 measures, there's required BMPs and measurable goals, so the state can measure how we're doing. There's over 150 BMPs in our stormwater management program, and I wanted to stress that because that's why our SWMP is so big. It kind of intimidates some people, but really what this is a lot of good stuff on how our city in general protects surface water quality. Of those 150 BMPs, 45 of them are specific to the Creeks Division that we have to comply with within our division of 9 staff members. So really the Creeks Division has taken on a large role in compliance with these regulations. Another 15 of those are Creeks Division coordinating with other departments. And then the rest, 100 plus, are assigned to Waterfront Department, Airport Department, Parks and Recreation Department plays a large role, Public Works, Community Development. They're big on the post-construction requirements, obviously on design of development, and the Fire Department. One new and exciting thing that's been going on the past year that I wanted to mention in this update is that the general permit for these discharges, stormwater discharges, is being renewed and updated. It actually expired back in 2008, but Water Board staff is only now really creating a draft to address the expiration of the current permit. So the draft came out in this past spring, summer, and Creeks Division staff participated in a quite large review and comment effort that was really led by CASCA, that's the California Stormwater Quality Association. And it was large because the draft is very large. There's a lot going on in it. It's thick, and there's a lot of new changes being proposed, significant changes in requirements. So CASCA submitted a table letter that was 80 pages long, very specific on here's what we propose is more reasonable. And the Creeks Division also submitted a letter to the Water Board with more general comments. And since then, Water Board staff has sort of retrieved, and now they're working on another draft. So that has not been resubmitted yet to the public, but we expect to see one very soon, within the next month or two. And they're claiming that they're still on schedule for early 2013 for the actual draft to be out and implemented. That has yet to be seen, so we're waiting to see what happens. Another event that the City Creeks Division has been involved in this past year is the Central Coast Joint Effort, is how we refer to it. Really, the technical name is the Joint Effort for Hydro Modification, Control, and Low Impact Development. Again, another mouthful, but what it really means is, I should mention, it's led by the Central Coast Water Quality Control Board. That's our regional water board. So this is not a statewide effort. It's really our Central Coast Board making an effort to have a more cohesive and what they see as perhaps a more effective way of managing stormwater within the Central Coast. So the intent is to protect watershed processes and apply site-specific, so it would be more specific to different areas within the region, numeric criteria and thresholds. And this has been sort of shaking out over the past 2 years, really, but just this past 2011 is when they started presenting actual drafts to us and what they were thinking. So we've been involved in that, and we've been reviewing the drafts and commenting. Implementation is scheduled for early 2013, so it's right in line with the general permit update. Again, this is sort of kind of left hanging. We're not sure where it's going. But really, Creek staff is proposing to maintain our current program with minimal changes. We've been talking to Water Board staff about that a lot because we have a lot invested in our program. As I mentioned in the beginning, we've taken 7 or 8 years to develop it. A lot of stakeholder meetings and outreach has already been conducted to get everyone to buy on to our current program and understand it. So to change regulations and to change everything is something that we want to minimize. Okay, so let's get into the work that we're actually doing rather than talking too much about what we're not sure what's going to happen. Year 3, 2011, last year, I mentioned we coordinate, the Creeks Division coordinates and compiles the annual reporting, and that involves quarterly reporting from 13 different departments and divisions who get me their reports on a quarterly basis showing how they're complying with the stormwater BMPs that they're assigned to. My annual report summarizes the implementation of all of these measurable goals and BMPs, and the nice thing this last year was that we actually did not receive any formal comments or program edits from the Water Board from our Year 2 report. So there wasn't this large response to comments and program modification that usually has to happen every year. It was kind of nice. We just got to do the good work and focus in on our program. One other thing I wanted to mention that is sort of a new addition to annual reporting is this program effectiveness assessment. And that's something that that CASCA, again, the California Stormwater Quality Association, came up with for the Water Board 2 years back to give them a tool to assess how effective our programs are as Phase 2 municipalities. And the Water Board liked it so much that they said, all of you municipalities, you now have to use this program effectiveness assessment and include it in your annual reporting. So there's another big chapter on the end of the annual report that actually assesses our effectiveness. And it's fairly interesting. Let's start with the first minimum control measure, public education and outreach. This really is the section of our SWMP that educates the public about runoff impacts and methods to reduce stormwater pollution by the individual within the city. So really highlights this past year, one of the BMPs requires that we present at least 132 youth presentations, and we reach at least 3,000 youth, and we exceeded that goal by far. 163 presentations were actually given in 2011, and an estimated 4,500 students were reached. So our public education and outreach program is doing really well. There was a new brochure created. It's called Home Improvement in Healthy Creeks, and I have to give Elizabeth Smith kudos. She makes really nice public outreach materials and just really professionally done, so we don't have to contract out for these things. It's kind of nice. And it's nice for the homeowner. So these things are at the community development planning counter, and we use them at all of our public events and hand these things out on how how to maintain your pollutants on site when you're doing household common everyday things or upgrades to your home. One other thing in the public education outreach is that over 100 businesses are now certified as Clean Creeks certified businesses. We bring on new restaurants, automotive, and or mobile washer businesses every year into this Clean Creek certified business program, and that's really an education outreach program to businesses on how to manage their wastewater. If they need to wash their mats, or they need to wash a car, or they need to wash their awnings, how they should really capture their wastewater and keep it on site. You're not supposed to be able to read this slide, but it just demonstrates that it's kind of neat that we've reached this many businesses within the city of Santa Barbara. The top chunk is restaurants. I think there's close to 70 restaurants certified, and the lower half is certified mobile washers and automotive businesses. Public involvement really fosters active community support for protecting water quality, and the highlights of public involvement is what we're doing today. This is a Creeks Advisory Committee meeting, and that's an opportunity for public to come and be involved. Intergovernmental meetings is another one that happens on a quarterly basis, where I actually go and meet with all the other municipalities within the Central Coast, and we talk about how the stormwater management programs are going, what we're doing different. It's a really great information sharing opportunity. Stakeholder meetings is something that the county holds also on a quarterly basis. We are required to attend those, and it's beneficial to do so. Good information sharing on stormwater management. There's an annual Community Water Quality Forum, as most of you know. In 2011, it was a Search for Water theme. It was a historical recount by Neal Graffy on how creeks have been a big part of our history. Volunteer projects is a big part of the public involvement section of the SWMP, and 268 volunteers in 2011 participated in either creek cleanups or invasive plant removal. So more and more participation is happening every year, and it's good to see. Illicit discharge detection and elimination. It's just a fancy way of saying illegal discharges. How do we manage those, and how do we enforce those? They work to identify and eliminate sources of illicit discharges, and that the big element of this section is really enforcement. Last year, in 2011, we received 222 calls on our enforcement hotline, and that's over 20 more than we received in year 2, and I think it's something like 40 or 50 more than we received in year 1. So the good news is that our outreach is getting out to people, and people are reporting back to us when they see pollution happening. That resulted in about 89 notices of violations is what NOVs are. So that, again, is another good outreach effort. They get a letter, and it's a warning saying, hey, you're not supposed to be doing what you're doing, and this is why. And 10 citations, and that means that some resident or business owner actually had to pay a fine. Creek staff also does an inspection program for this minimum control measure. Last year we inspected 5 large commercial facilities. The requirement was that they be 100,000 square feet or larger. And so that was beneficial in that you get to meet with the management company or person of those large commercial facilities and talk to them about ways to improve their water runoff and the quality of it from their sites, how to manage that. Construction site stormwater control. This is something that obviously the building department and their inspectors have to comply with. They own this chapter, I should say, in the SWMP. 53 city projects were reviewed for erosion and sediment BMPs. There's a new tracking mechanism that the building department is using for this, so you'll notice that last year's number was quite larger than this, and that's only because now the building department is reporting only on projects that have erosion control plans. Before, it was erroneously reported that this huge amount of projects were actually doing active construction sites, whereas they just came in for a building permit for some kind of internal modification. So the 53 is more of a relevant reflection of how many projects actually took place on tearing up the ground in 2011. That just 53 projects resulted in 483 field inspections for erosion control. And of those almost 500 inspections, there were about 49 correction notices and or warnings. No stop work orders were warranted. The inspectors reported back, and the simple math shows that that translates to about 10% of the construction sites really requiring major improvements or fixes in 2011. And they do meet the 100% eventual compliance requirement. Post-construction stormwater management. This is where the big effort has been on, well, partly the Creeks Division and the city on producing a stormwater BMP guidance manual that happened back in 2008, and that really nailed down what are our requirements for new and or redevelopment projects. So it implements design requirements to address stormwater runoff from development projects. Year 3 culminated in 140 projects implementing post-construction BMPs. And this is the most important and the most exciting part of the program to me, is that all of these development and redevelopment projects are actually implementing new controls that wouldn't have normally been required 3 or 4 years ago that actually manage stormwater on site for residential, commercial, you name it. That's 60 more projects than last year, and over 100 more projects as compared to year 1. So this shows, I think, a big element of success of our SWMP. We have better tracking in this through the Community Development Department now, through our Tidemark system. It's just a computer system now where they actually are tracking what level of post-construction controls did the project implement and how did they actually comply, what kind of BMPs were implemented for the projects. And Creek staff still continues on a day-to-day basis to educate project applicants. They have my number, and they give calls and come in for meetings all the time on clarifying what is my requirement, how do I meet it. And we have not allowed exemptions to date. It has been successful in finding ways to meet these requirements. The last control measure is pollution prevention and good housekeeping for city staff. This really focuses in on municipal operations and how our day-to-day jobs as city employees can protect water quality. So the measurable goals and BMPs in this section are have to do with city facility inspections. The Creeks Division inspects different large city facilities every year, sometimes the same one every year, and then follow-up actions are identified. So we're constantly improving. Street sweeping is another big best management practice in this section. Last year, over 2,064 tons of waste material was removed from our street gutters. So that's over 2,000 tons of what would have normally made its way into the creeks. And the last big effort in this section that I'll highlight tonight is the city staff training. I mentioned there's 13 people who report to me on how they're meeting their best management practices, but I'm also expected every year to train them, every year to remind them, what are your BMPs, how do you implement them, making sure they're complying. So it always refreshes staff's awareness on protecting water quality, and we've noticed that there's always a spike in enforcement calls about a week or two after these trainings, so that's kind of nice. City staff who are out in the field every day all of a sudden notice again, oh geez, we're not supposed to be seeing that. And the program effectiveness assessment is really the closer on the annual report. I evaluate all the BMPs, identify any modifications that may be needed, and it ultimately determines if our overall program is working effectively. In year 3, the conclusion was pretty clear that we're on track for an effective stormwater program. And in closing, next steps. We're about 5 months into year 4 already of our stormwater management program. I can't believe it, and this is technically a 5-year program. So we'll be looking at an update here in about a year and a half. The annual report is due every year, so our next one will be due April 2013. And this is really dependent on the outcome of the general permit update. So we're still waiting to see how that's going to shake things up, how that may or may not change things for us. That's it. I'll keep you posted. You'll be hearing all about the general permit and the joint effort from me next time I'm up here, I'm sure. So thank you for your time, and now I'm open to questions.
Yeah, thank you, Autumn. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Autumn?
I have a question. How can the general permit be out of expired for so long? What are the ramifications of it being expired?
That's a good question. I just looked that up last week. So the permit language says that it is in effect until something is effectively approved down the road. So there's just that protective language in there. Yes. So technically we've still been in compliance with the Clean Water Act and implementing this permit requirements, but yeah, it's due.
Thank you, Autumn. It's good to see a lot of progress. I know how hard you've worked.
Thank you.
Given that most of the life of this permit has taken place in the middle of a mini depression where there's abnormally low amounts of construction and development, and also in a period of record global heating with irregular rainfall, have you and your team throughout the city put together some lessons learned so that if and when within our lifetimes the economy begins to bounce back or rainfall patterns go to a more normal situation and there's some larger challenges out there, that your whole team is confident that the new updated SWMP will be able to handle them? You know, like let's say the Parker family down at East Beach someday actually decide to do something with their lovely hole and duck pond.
Right. You want to take that one? Yeah.
Sure. Madam Chair, Mr. Moldaver, I think that we've actually, it's actually worked well having a really significant, large regulatory program coming into the city during that time, because it could have been pretty overwhelming for city staff and for the design and building community in particular to kind of absorb that if things were going full speed ahead. And I think that now we've had an opportunity to work through the system. We've had a lot of opportunities for trainings with architects and engineers and builders, and so I think we've really utilized that time to really lay the foundation. And I think we're just starting to see that pick back up again, and everyone's aware. Autumn still gets a lot of calls from people, but more and more people are coming up with really creative and effective ideas to manage their stormwater and prevent pollution from leaving the property and getting into the city's storm drain system and then into the creeks and ocean. And one thing I want to make clear to everybody that's not necessarily clear in this large regulatory scheme, the city is permitted to discharge water out of its stormwater out of its storm drain system into the creeks and into the ocean, permitted by the state and federal government. And so if pollutants come off somebody's property, as soon as they come off someone's property and they enter the gutter, the street, the gutter, the storm drain system, they become the property of the city. So that those pollutants are then owned by the city, and the city's liable for them when they get out into the creeks and ocean. And so that's the reason the city's interested in people collecting and treating that stormwater before it leaves their private property.
And as part of the public outreach, are you or someone on your team going to be tabling Monday night at the Green Building Alliance open house and showcase next Monday next to Playa Azul, where all people in the community interested in good building and design practices will be invited for an open house and showcase?
Thank you for mentioning that, Committee Member Moldaver. We actually just gave a big training through the Santa Barbara Contractors Association last month, maybe 6 weeks ago, regarding stormwater management requirements for development and redevelopment. And the contractors and engineers that showed up, it was a great turnout. We had upwards of 50 people show up that day. And so for a training, that's really, really great. And I don't believe that we're planning on being at this next Monday night's deal, but I feel like the outreach to that community in general is has been successful recently. Thanks for mentioning that, though. I plan to be there myself, personally, as a homeowner.
Your presentation's so great, and I think that the city
you.
of Santa Barbara does a fantastic job monitoring the creeks. I happen to live in the county, and do you guys ever provide insight, advice, suggestions, help to the county as they try to step up to the same level of protection?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a big part of our interdepartmental meetings, intergovernmental meetings. That's right. Not within the city, but within the Central Coast that we do. And the county leads those meetings and brings us all together every few months. So that's meeting with not just the county, but Lompoc and Santa Maria and Carpinteria, among others, obviously. And so that information sharing is really beneficial. And Kathleen Garnand of Project Clean Water in the county is the largest participant of that. And so we're always reporting back and forth to one another on, how we get things done and how to improve. So I admire the county for that effort on their part. Yes.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I'm wondering, did the general repair of the sewers that was at issue in the Channel Keeper lawsuit and settlement agreement play in at all to the rewriting of the SWMP, or is that's fallen under somebody else's department? Or?
No, that's a good question. It doesn't have anything to do with the stormwater management program. It's completely separate. The stormwater management program really focuses in on what happens with our storm drains, whereas what you're referring to is the city's sewer system. And so that is, a coordinated effort with the wastewater department and the water treatment department and the other city divisions involved. I don't know if you want to add to that.
So the channels don't meet at all in terms of how we catch and funnel the stormwater. They don't end up meeting up with the sewer at all? Or?
No. There are areas, no. They are separate pipe systems entirely. Good question. Yeah.
I just had one question.
Yes.
The 5 facilities that you guys inspect, how do you choose which 5 facilities you inspect every year? Is that
Good question. So the requirement, the BMP was starting in year 3 to do these large facility inspections. And the only direction that's in our stormwater management program is that it has to be 100,000 square feet or larger. And so we did an inventory of all commercial parcels within the city that are 500,000 square feet or larger, and then we found sort of the ones that we thought would be the biggest bang for our buck, basically commercial facilities that might have the most potential for stormwater pollution. And so we started with a big hotel and a big shopping center area, those kind of things. So I think that it was a good start, and it was nice to hone in on those big areas and talk to the actual managers and make some good adjustments. Luckily, there were no large, egregious things going on that were big pollutants in any of them. I was impressed to not find anything very significant, but some positive changes were made.
Yeah, I would just add that those inspections are a requirement of the permit, and they apply to public facilities as well as private commercial facilities.
Right.
So the city of Santa Barbara has, I think, 8 locations where we have a 100,000 square foot or larger facility. The location where this building is one of them.
Not many.
We're required to do 5 public and 5 private, and we end up doing all 8 public facilities, and we'll do that every year. And it's a good opportunity just to make sure everything's in place. So we're implementing all of the BMPs that we have available. I just did a count the other day of how many 100,000 square foot or larger private facilities there are, and I can't remember the exact number. It was in the 30s. So over the period of several years, we'll end up getting to all of them. But as Autumn mentioned, several of them are our large shopping centers. You know, we have La Cumbre Plaza, Paseo Nuevo, 5 Points. Those are some of the examples. Down in what's called the Funk Zone, there's a lot of industrial facilities that are that size, but they're some of them are isolated like that, and some are really concentrated in next to each other. So we're really trying to get 5 is our permit requirement, but we're trying to get as many of them as we can.
Right.
And for both the private and public ones, it's always a kind of an educational opportunity. And I think generally speaking, what we find is those large facilities all have managers who look after them. They know a lot already, and so kind of working together, we can try to develop the best pollution prevention practices on that property, and people are generally really receptive to that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anna?
Yeah, just a quick question. Specifically for businesses who wish to get certified, what are the steps into going to that road through the inspection?
Good question. Thank you. It's a completely voluntary program, so we do receive calls from some businesses. They can call our general line, the 897-2688 is really kind of the publicized line for Creeks Division. That's not only our enforcement line, but it's just a good way to get hold of us and ask questions. So the business certification program is, a lot of the time we just go out and meet with businesses who we think would be good opportunities to target and to reach out to. But obviously, if anybody wants to give a call and set up an appointment, it's as simple as going over a one-page checklist. We call it an inspection form, but it doesn't take longer than 15 minutes. And then we do a quick walkthrough through the facility to see how they manage if they have a mop sink to dump their wash water, if they have a place to wash their mats, or if we're dealing with a mobile wash or an automotive business, we look for their pollution control equipment. So if they're missing anything and they need help on managing their wastewater or polluted wash water, then we actually have a grant program through the Creeks Division where we can buy them up to $1,000 worth of equipment. We can buy them wet vacuums, berms, secondary containment devices, you name it. There's a big, long list of approved products that are part of the program, so it's really neat that we have this grant money that we can actually give to businesses to help them protect the storm drains. So it's a really positive thing to do, and we hope to keep it going.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Autumn.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're going to move on to item 7B, Outreach and Education Update from Liz Smith, who's the Outreach and Education Coordinator.
Hello, everyone. Okay, this is moving a little slow tonight. So, as Betsy mentioned, my name is Liz Smith, and I'm the Creeks Outreach Coordinator. And I'm here this evening to give you a brief update on our education and outreach programs. So once we get moving here.
While we're waiting for that to start, I'll just say that the Creeks Division focuses all of its efforts in 3 major areas. One is clean water, one is creek restoration, and the third is outreach and education. And that really, the basis for that is in Measure B, which was passed by voters in 2000. And one of the reasons that education and outreach programs are so important for water quality is the biggest water quality or water pollution source in the city of Santa Barbara, like most cities in this country, is called non-point source pollution. It's urban runoff, and that means it's not the pollution coming from a factory or out of a pipe and that you can easily look at and put some kind of treatment on. This is runoff pollution that's coming off of the surface of roads and buildings and parking lots, and it's really coming from all of us. So in order to try to get a handle on that pollution source, it really is essential that we do outreach to the public, because all of us are part of the problem. So everybody needs to understand that so that we can all be part of the solution. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Liz.
Thanks. Good intro. Okay, so the different components of our education and outreach program include youth watershed education, community events, media outreach, internet-based outreach, and project and program outreach. And as Autumn mentioned, these are included in the SWMP, and we have measurable goals associated with them that we need to meet each year. Excuse me. Our youth watershed education is primarily contracted through Art from Scrap, and they provide in-class presentations, field trips to the Watershed Resource Center and to local creeks, and they reached 4,271 students in fiscal year 11, which was July 2010 through June 2011. We work with the Parks and Recreation Department's Nature Camp program, which will be starting up in a few weeks here, and we'll provide one presentation to each session of Nature Camp over the summer. For the past several years, we've partnered with the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary's Marito program, and that is multicultural education for resource issues threatening oceans. So, in January, we took 30 students from Franklin School down to Sycamore Creek, where they planted 35 native plants. And then we also continue to work with Youth Cinemedia, which is a local organization that works with at-risk teens and teaches them graphic design, video production, and photography. Our largest community event each year is Creek Week, which we coordinate with the County Project Clean Water, the cities of Goleta and Carpinteria, and also now UCSB is getting involved more. We had over 1,400 participants in 27 events last year, and it keeps getting bigger each year, it seems. This year's event is scheduled for September 15th through 23rd, and it'll kick off again with Coastal Cleanup Day, which we've done the past few years. So anyone who's interested in finding out more or getting involved can visit sbcreekweek.com, and then we also have a Facebook page set up, so facebook.com/sbcreekweek to find out more. Another annual event that we do is a water quality forum, and last year that featured Neal Graffy. He's a local historian and just a wealth of information and stories and photos, and he talked about the search for water, which was really about early Santa Barbarans and their reliance on our local creeks for clean water to use for their drinking sources and everything else. So really talked about their relationship with the creeks. We participate in the City Environmental Services Division's Looking Good Santa Barbara event. It's an annual community cleanup, and this year is scheduled for June 2nd, in just a few weeks here. The main event will happen at Ortega Park, but there will also be a satellite location at Bonet Park. And so at Ortega Park, we'll be leading folks in storm drain marking throughout the neighborhood. And then over at Bonet Park, we'll do a creek cleanup of Old Mission Creek. We coordinate the California Coastal Commission's Adopt a Beach programs in the city. And last year that amounted to 310 volunteer hours donated by groups like the Urban Creeks Council, Channel Keeper, the Hyatt, the Chumash Maritime Association, and our newest one now is Brooks Institute. And they'll be out this weekend doing a cleanup. And then we also schedule other volunteer events with different groups and organizations throughout the year. So just in the last few weeks, we've had a couple of student groups from Santa Barbara City College, and this weekend there's also a group from Santa Barbara Business College going out to do a cleanup. So we have a lot of volunteer events happening throughout the year. And then we also provide informational tables at events like the Earth Day Festival, Harbor and Seafood Festival, and several other events throughout the year. Our media outreach. So we run English and Spanish television PSAs on many Cox Media channels and also Univision, KSBY, and KEYT. And I think last year when I talked to you, we had found out we were nominated for a regional Emmy. And shortly after that, we found out that we won. So that was pretty exciting for the ad featuring George Johnson as a surfer in the gutter. So that was pretty exciting. And next month, we'll actually be going out and shooting some new commercials. So we are ready to get rolling on that and get some new material out there. And then we continue with radio PSAs in English and Spanish on Rincon stations and also on KDB. Print ads run in The Independent, The Daily Sound, Casa Magazine, and SB Latino. And then our MTV bus ads are on the interiors of the buses all year and on the exteriors during the summer months. So we'll have ads going up next month. Our internet outreach, obviously the hub of that is our website, sbcreeks.com, which received just under 6,400 visitors in fiscal year 11. And the city is about to embark on a major website redesign, so we'll be excited to see what that brings us, and hopefully it'll be more visually appealing and dynamic and exciting. So we're looking forward to that. We have our monthly email newsletter that we send out to 614 subscribers. We have started doing a bit of online advertising, but we haven't really fully jumped into that. But we have kind of done some trial runs on Independent, Newshawk, Ed Hat, and we currently have some on KPMR, which is Univision's website in Spanish. And then we also have our Facebook page, which is at facebook.com/sbcreeks, and we have 90 likes at this time. So around our various projects and programs, we do a lot of outreach. Autumn mentioned the Clean Water Business Program. We send these fun little postcards out, just direct mail, cold calls. We advertise in an automotive newsletter. We reach a lot of businesses through enforcement actions. Somebody lets us know that they're doing something wrong. We go talk to them, and then we let them know, hey, we can certify you, we can buy you equipment so that you don't have this problem again. And then we also promote it at community events. We have our Creek Tree program going on. We've done direct mail, promoting it at community events, but have found that door-to-door approach has worked the best. With our capital projects, a lot of outreach happens. We have community meetings leading up to the project. We have volunteer opportunities often with plantings at big restoration projects. And then we have ribbon cutting ceremonies. There are a few familiar faces there. And then we tend to install interpretive signage after the fact. And then throughout the city, we have creek signs and storm drain markers that just are visual reminders that, you know, you're near a creek or you're next to a storm drain, and that's going to flow right to the creek. So those are important, and we strive to keep those maintained. A special project that we have actually starting this week, we're working with the UCSB Environmental Studies course, and they're going to be out in the community conducting surveys on attitudes and behaviors around cigarette butts and pet waste. So they'll be out at some pet stores, they'll be out on the beach and at parks and shopping centers and downtown. So just kind of observing people first, and then also trying to catch them and get them to do a survey. And so we'll have results from them next month. And measuring outcomes. In 2002, we did a baseline public opinion survey where we asked people about the role of storm drains, their knowledge on causes of pollution, their current behaviors, their willingness to change behaviors. Then in 2008, we did a follow-up survey. And you can see we asked people, do you live in a watershed? Only 22% said yes. So we know we have work to do. And we also asked them if they recalled our outreach efforts, so particular slogans like the ocean begins on your street, and had they seen our outreach materials out in the community. And so next year we'll be looking at doing another follow-up survey and asking a lot of the same questions to see how answers have changed over time. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
What would you say during the last year you would view as the biggest success, and in the year to come, what do you see potentially for the community as a big or unmet challenge?
Wow. Gosh, that's a tough one. I think a lot of our success comes with the youth education, because the kids really are open to taking in a lot of information, and they catch on to the concepts really quickly, and they can help educate their parents, and that's just a great avenue for us to really reach out to the entire family and eventually the whole community. So I think that that's a really successful program. And the challenge for the coming year, probably that I'm going to be gone for a few months. It's going to be a challenge, but it's just ongoing. It's really hard, I think, to gauge the success of the outreach program. A lot of what we hear is anecdotal, so it'll be great to see that survey next year and see how we're doing.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
If people in the community or families of school students who have gone through the program training want to get involved in the Saturday, June 2nd cleanup day, either at Ortega Park or Bonet Park, what should they do? Is there a hotline phone number that they could call, or is there an email address that they could go to?
They can just visit lookinggoodsb.com, and all of the contact information is there, or they can just show up the day of. It's 9 a.m., and again, it's at Ortega Park, just around the corner here, or at Bonet Park.
So if there are families on the east or west side that may not have access to computer and internet, but they want to participate, they can come to Ortega Park or Bonet Park on Saturday, June 2nd?
Right, just show up at 9 a.m., and after the cleanup event happens at noon, then there is lunch, raffle prizes, usually like dance performances. I mean, they make a huge community event out of it. So,
and I felt like I had to point out that your team had a great booth at Earth Day, and we were doing a lot of quality education, both for this program and for Creeks in general.
Thank you.
I have one quick question on the surveys that you do for kind of evaluating your program. How do you guys conduct those? Are they electronic or mail?
It's a telephone survey, so we hire a company to take care of that, and they call. It's South County that they get the numbers from, I believe. So it's not just in the city; it's also the surrounding areas. And so it's primarily residents, and they have a certain number of Spanish speakers that they want to reach, so we're getting that community. And then it's also the business community, so they're calling businesses and speaking to the managers and finding out their knowledge and have they heard of the Clean Water Business Program, and what are they doing to protect water in their business.
Do you know how many people more or less they speak to?
I think the number's about 400 to get a statistically significant sample. When we do that, that's something that our permit requires about every 5 years. So I don't know if most of you probably haven't been on the committee when we do that. When we do, we'll have the person come and they'll explain how we went through. It's a sort of a scientific process you go through with not only your questions but your sample size and your selection process, and things have become more complicated over time, particularly with cell phones. So I remember during our the last survey we did in 2008, we did part of it was to get cell only phone users, so that people without landlines, or so that we weren't just taking a sample of people with landlines. We were looking for the cell only. So I'm sure that's evolved a lot over the last 4 or 5 years. So it will be really interesting to sit down with whoever we end up with as a consultant to learn kind of how they're dealing with that, to try to get accurate results.
I had one last question. I couldn't help noticing, which people at home may not realize, that our former Creeks Committee chair, who's now our Planning Commission liaison, is here, and he was involved with the start of this program when he was on the committee. I was wondering whether Michael Jordan had any questions or comments that he'd like to put out, because he's been very quietly and patiently monitoring our whole hearing. So, anything, Michael? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I'm part of like a youth coalition under the Public Health Department, and just last month we went to do like a cigarette butt cleanup at UCSB, and we had less than 10 volunteers go, and we collected over 5,000 cigarette butts. Wow. And then we went back about a week later, and in certain spots where we like dug up a lot, same amount was there again. And so I think like cigarette butts is definitely something that's overlooked, because it's so small and a lot of people do it, but it's definitely going in our creeks, and we see it in our beaches a lot. But it was a really big number with just less volunteers. So there was twice as many volunteers. You probably would have picked up twice as many. So
yeah, it's the number one item picked up at Coastal Cleanup Day, and all of our beach cleanups we find them. So it's a big issue.
Yeah.
Any more questions, comments? Thank you, Liz.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, I think everyone who's been watching or listening to the hearing recognizes that our advisory committee has the best vice chair in the city for how well you ran the meeting. Would this be an appropriate time to move adjournment?
Please.
So moved then.
Do we have a second?
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you.